Hello and welcome. These are crucial times for democratic processes in Africa, where the pendulum of political discourse continues to swing from tweets to streets, with governance largely seen as deficient and leadership close to inefficient. The last few days have also come and gone, with a reminder on the need for Africa to care more and look after its own, the girl child. This is Africa This Week, and I'm your guide, Fadishola Shotingwa. We start off the day with earlier in the week. Welcome on board. On the news on Monday, 12 suspects were arrested for the killing of 3 Chinese nationals in the Central African Republic. The Central African Republic's Interior Minister made the announcement and said the suspects were sent to the country's southwestern Beberati city for trials, and the search operation for other suspects was still ongoing. The 3 Chinese nationals were killed in the Central African Republic's southwestern town of Soso Nakombo. They were amongst the 4 Chinese men who survived a shipwreck which left a local young man missing. They were attacked by a group of locals when they reported the shipwreck at a gendarme brigade. The attack killed the 3 Chinese and injured the 4th seriously. Still on Monday, about 50 people were killed and another 100 suffered serious burns after a fuel tanker collided with a vehicle in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC. The Deputy Governor of Congo Central Province, Atu Matubuana Nkuluku, said authorities were doing what they could to help victims of the crash in the village of Umbuta, about 130 kilometers from the capital. Roads in the Central African nation are notoriously bad after years of war and neglect. In 2010, at least 230 people were killed in Congo when a fuel tanker overturned and exploded, unleashing a fireball that tore through homes and cinemas packed with people watching a World Cup soccer. Newspapers in Cameroon were awash with the country's presidential election and described it as largely peaceful and transparent on Monday after voters went to the polls. But some candidates who stood against incumbent President Paul Biya have already warned of electoral fraud. On election day, there were isolated incidents of unrest in the separatist Anglophone regions of the Northwest and the Southwest, where local officials said voter participation was at its lowest ever. Tallying the nationwide vote, it could take up to 2 weeks. The odds are still against the opposition, including the main candidate, Joshua Osei of the Social Democratic Front. Party candidate Cabral Libi, who has a strong following amongst the country's youth, published a video on Facebook before the close of the polls accusing Biya of trying to fix the results. The authorities have said the election would be free and fair. On Tuesday, Nigerians were advised to set aside cultural and tribal differences and embrace dialogue in order to put an end to conflict in the country. This formed part of discussions at the final lap of the 2-day National Summit on Conflict Resolution, jointly organized by TVC Communications and the Nation newspapers in Abuja. Speakers at the summit spoke extensively on the need for the federal government to proffer a lasting solution to the security challenges in Nigeria.
16th century, 17th century, where our ancestors lived together with thieves. They are here, they are your grandparents. Why do we call them Munchi? Munchi, they know. We call them Munchi, but they are thieves. We call them that because long as I said before we knew about America or England, before we knew anything about the hippie culture, there was this kind of honesty, dedication, and commitment amongst ourselves, the Nigerian people.
I will appeal to the federal government to have the political will to implement the recommendations and resolutions from this conference, because that is what is lacking. Oftentimes, we'll come and speak and go. Nobody will be able to implement. They will just be put, probably, I don't know whether they have a store in the National Museum, I don't know. All laudable initiatives, good recommendations. Once you live here, you won't hear anything about it. I'm appealing to the government to have the strong will to establish a strong commission to reconcile the farmers and herders in this country. The reason is simple. We have injured ourselves so much. The fiber of peaceful coexistence has been disrupted. It has been severed. We need one another. I appeal to the government to establish a very strong commission to look into these issues of farmer herders so that implementation will be easier. Because you cannot just leave this issue like that without any body that is responsible for implementing all these issues.
If you look at this farmer-herder conflict, we are resolved amicable in the past. Why now are they so fatal? Where sophisticated answers are used. Therefore, they hide under the disguise of farmer-herder conflict and achieve their nefarious and wicked black agenda.
The government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria should revitalize or get the extension farmers of, the animal, business revived so that these insistent clashes will not be there. Talking about the policing, police are not magicians. They are trained to keep the peace and keep order. They are not supposed to use weapons to hurt any of the citizens.
On Wednesday, Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta described the bus crash which killed 50 persons as catastrophic. Kenyatta said authorities are investigating the cause of the accident, which occurred between Nairobi and the western city of Kisumu. Witnesses and police say the bus swerved off the road while driving down a steep slope and rolled into a ditch in Kericho County. According to Police Commandant James Mugera, the bus was traveling from Nairobi to Kakamega and was carrying 52 passengers. He also revealed 7 children were amongst those killed in the crash, and survivors are receiving treatment at local hospitals.
Initial information we got is that the driver lost control of the vehicle and rolled down this cliff where it landed down there. And as a result of that accident, we have lost several lives. So far, we have been able to count 50 persons dead as a result of the accident. Yes, 50, 31 men, 12 women, and 7 children. A few survivors were rescued from the scene and taken to various hospitals within the county, some at Mohoroni, Fort Tenan, and some at Kericho County Hospital.
On Thursday, October the 11th, Africa joined the rest of the world to mark the International Day of the Girl Child. It is a day assigned to address socio-cultural practices hampering the advancement of the girl child in nations around the world, including here in Nigeria.
It's important that we begin to give attention to the feminine segments of society right from when they are very young, and I think that's just one of the key reasons why we commemorate the International Day of the Girl Child.
Girls have been discriminated against, they've been marginalized more than the other sex, and we feel that it's important that we use opportunities such as these to show more light and advocate for increased focus on their issues.
And I would like to create an initiative to disseminate that it's not only education. Sometimes some people are not privileged. I know I'm privileged, but some people around streets, they don't have this privilege I have. So that's creating an initiative, telling them that it's not just education. You don't really need to feel bad. You can do something like technical, coaching, tailoring.
I've learned that girls are really, really important, and we girls, we have a future. So like now, for example, now they've been saying girl child, and now they don't have a day for boy child. Meaning that girls are really, really important for them to give us, like, just us, tea and everything.
On Friday, at least 31 people were killed when flood waters triggered by a landslide swept debris through a town in eastern Uganda, wrecking homes and burying animals. Commissioner for Disaster Preparedness and Management said the landslide tumbled at Bukalasi, situated on the slopes of Mount Elgon in Budude, with most people caught unawares. The landslide pushed huge boulders into a river which burst its banks, and the water swept people. Large swaths on the slopes of Ugandan mountains have been denuded of their forest and other vegetation cover for cultivable land, increasing the risk of landslides. Many more are believed to be missing as the country reaches the peak of the second rainy season. And with that, we have come to the end of Earlier in the Week. Up next is Digging Deep, and that will be after the break. To stay with us. Welcome back to Africa This Week. In a world transformed by technology and innovation, society has never been short of questions on why there are more men lacking quality and even more women demanding equality, especially in Africa, where girls are taught to limit their potentials and ladies are forced to compress their ambitions. From contending with social bias to dealing with patriarchal perceptions, the continent is largely seen as a region where it is difficult to thrive and survive as a girl child more than anything else. Joining me to dig deep on Africa This Week is Dr. Ama Onyerima, founder, Live Abundantly Empowerment Initiative. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Very quickly, what are your thoughts on the plight of the girl child in Africa and around the world?
Well, it is of great concern and it should be of great concern to everyone, that so many of the girls in the developing nations, about 1 million of them, 600 million of them don't have access to quality education or a lifestyle that will enable them to contribute to their personal progress or the progress of a nation.
The girl child in Africa and in most developing countries seem to be at the receiving end with social bias and cultural norms. How can we start changing this narrative?
Well, the change begins with an understanding that we must have changed the perception of what it means to be a girl child. Education is necessary, as well as community efforts to improve the setting for girls, not just in developing nations, but throughout the world. We live in a world where girls are seen as second-class citizens. We live in a world where the abuse of girls is prevalent. We live in a world where women, even working women, because girls are women at the end of the day, do not earn the same wages as men and are subject to bias, harassment, abuse, even in the workplace. We live in a world where girls are forced into early marriage. We live in a world where girls do not have access to proper education or even health facilities or services.
Inequality even in the workplace. Well, according to statistics, 12 million girls under the age of 18 will be married this year, and 21 million girls aged 15 to 19 years will become pregnant in developing regions. Most of these pregnancies now are either unplanned or even unwanted. What is responsible for this?
I hate to repeat this. We have many factors. One, cultural bias. When you see girls as nothing but sexual objects or objects of gratification or objects or the vessels for bearing children, then you change your attitude towards them. The reality is boys and girls do grow up to be adults, and if given equal opportunity, equal education, access to skills, access to jobs, that they will, at the end of the day, be able to take care of themselves, their family, and contribute to their communities. We know that when we educate a girl, it changes the perspective for her family, her immediate family, as well as her community. We know that when we educate boys, they tend to think more about themselves and what they're going to do for themselves and their immediate family. So that shift in thinking needs to occur. In terms of the laws that we have on the books, and we have the UN human rights, we have child rights in Nigeria and everywhere else in the world. If you're a member nation of the United Nations, you have signed that agreement and you're supposed to enact it. But the reality is that these things are not being enforced. I mentioned very earlier that we estimate, or the estimate is that there are 1 billion children, youth, adolescents, however you wish to categorize them, in the world, and 600 million of those are girls. One of the things that we're pushing for is that these 600 million girls have access to primary education, secondary education, that they get skills. I mean, when you have skills, then you have better access to jobs. But we also need to go beyond that and encourage them to go to university. We need to stop this culture of trafficking girls so that they're sexual objects to men and sometimes women in other parts of the world. We need to stop this culture of marrying off our girls at 10, 11, 12, once they reach, puberty, they get married off. And of course, we all know that once they're married and they have children at a very young age, then we're dealing with health concerns like fistula. And at the end of the day, they really cannot be of any benefit to themselves or their family. They're too young. Anyone who is having intercourse with a girl under 18 is violating them. It doesn't matter if you're married to them, it is a violation. So there's so many factors that we have to work on. And I think the most important thing here is educating our girls, investing in our girls. Through education, through mentoring, through community activities that we do, so that they are empowered and they know that they deserve more and they can push for more for themselves as well.
So how is an initiative like yours mobilizing for the implementation of these UN rules?
Well, it starts with the things that we do at the school level, at the district level, and then we also have community activities. So this past week, we commemorated the UN Girl Child Day by having an event. Did I lose you?
No.
Okay, fantastic. We had an event where we commemorated the UN Girl Child Day by having an event at the hearing impaired school locally, the Wesley School for Hearing Impaired Students. We thought it was very important because, we talk about girls, but we're not talking about the girls who are dealing with physiological differences. You can only imagine to what extent these girls are suffering under these conditions, where some of them, if they're lucky, do go to school, but the majority of them have no access to school. And even when they do go to school, like we heard on Thursday at our event, they go home and they're basically like housemaids. They're there to care for the family, and they're not being given equal opportunity as their own siblings. So we do feel that it's important to diversify how we interact with girls, not just girls who have full use of all their senses, but girls who are also dealing with physiological differences, because they're the ones who are scarred in a way that is more devastating than you can imagine.
Dr. Ahmad, do we really have enough government policies that frown at crimes against the girl child?
That's a very good question. Do we have policies? Yes. Do we enact the policies and follow them? You know the answer to that question. Not really.
So how do you react to this, really?
You continue to spread the message. You continue to go to the community and go to the schools and teach the young ones. I truly believe that this next generation coming up is incredibly aware of what's going on. They've got social media. They've got access to everything going on around the world. And they are going to demand that more is done for themselves, both the girls and the boys. But we're really focused on the girls because the disparity in access to education, in access to jobs, is apparent, is blatant. You only have to pick up the paper and read about the level of violence that these girls are suffering, even in their own homes, when you have parents, fathers, uncles, brothers molesting members of their families. It is troubling. So when you disrespect them in the home, why else should anyone respect them outside of the home?
Well, would you say consistent action has matched advocacy in reversing these negative trends befalling the girl child?
Well, I would like to believe that it is. I think what we have is more of an awareness, but we're not approaching the solutions. We're not prosecuting perpetrators. We're not encouraging or pushing for more girls, even those with physiological differences, to access school at an early age. You can go to some of these schools and find out that a 10-year-old is in kindergarten. You and I know a 10-year-old should be beyond kindergarten. But if the parents are ashamed of their children with physiological differences and they're hiding them at home, and it takes so long to get them into the school system, then we're literally limiting how much education, how many skills they can develop, and their access to work. The truth of the matter is, girls who have access to the economic system can take care of themselves, take care of their families, and contribute to the community and the society at large.
That's another aspect of the girl child we have not really looked into: physiological differences. Dr. Ama Onyerima, founder, Live Abundantly Empowerment Initiative, thank you for joining me on Africa This Week.
Thank you for having me.
Beyond a one-day international observance, it is worth taking a moment every day to reflect on issues like social discrimination, gender-based violence, female genital mutilation, and how the world is increasingly unsafe for the average girl child. Consistent actions must then match advocacy in reversing the negative trends, knowing that Africa's hope towards becoming a better place lies in how it treats its women. That's our program for today, and I have been your guide, Fadeshala Shotunga. Many thanks for watching, and bye for now.